Hello and welcome to the Happy Horse Nutrition Podcast. I'm Dr. Nerida and today's episode is one I am genuinely excited to share. I'm joined by Zac, a thoroughbred breeding farm manager who, as part of annual farm activities, is tasked with preparing yearlings for sale. And we are talking about what happened when he made some big changes to the way his last cohort of yearlings were fed. Yearling prep is high pressure. These young horses need to grow, build muscle, look polished and be ready for the sales ring. Traditionally, that has often meant a lot of grain and not always enough thought given to forage diversity and gut health. But after listening to the Happy Horse Nutrition Podcast, Zac decided to try a different approach. In this conversation, we talk about what he changed, what he noticed in the horses, and why feeding yearlings in a way that better supports their gut can make such a difference to appetite, behaviour and overall well-being. This is such a practical conversation and I think there is a lot in here for anyone feeding young horses, thoroughbreds, performance horses or really any horse at all. Let's jump right on in. Hey Zac, and welcome to the Happy Horse Nutrition Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being a willing participant. So backstory for this episode is that Zac sent me a message and he goes, hey, this is paraphrasing your words. I've been listening to the podcast, changed a few things and this is what I've seen. And I said to Zac, do you want to come on the podcast and talk about that? Because it's really cool. And you're in the thoroughbred industry and it's one of the industries I think that is slowest to change, slowest to follow the science in Australia, not necessarily in other parts of the world, but certainly in Australia. So yeah, I really just want to have a chat about what it was that you changed and the differences you saw in your horses, because it's exciting to me and I think it'll be really helpful to a lot of other people. So to start with, Zac, can you tell us a little bit about the farm that you're on, a little bit about its background, what your role is and just sort of lead us into, I guess, because we're going to be talking about yearlings in yearling prep. So just sort of lead us into what yearling prep looks like on your farm, because it's different on lots of farms.
Yeah. So we've got a thoroughbred broodmare farm in Scone in the Hunn Valley in New South Wales. So it's a family owned and run operation. So I sort of manage it in conjunction with my dad. Yeah, we got sort of 70 permanent mares and sell probably, sort of 20, 25, 30 yearlings a year, depending on market and what people want to do with their horses and stuff. The yearlings, obviously, there's a selection process from the sales companies. They come and look at them. Basically, they decide what sales they can get into. Then, sort of depending on the sale, the time of the year and how good the sale is, they're prepped for between sort of 8 and 12 weeks. Basically, they're bought in, they're put in a stable for some period of the day, like depending on the farm, that can vary from probably 23 hours a day to 12 hours a day, sort of depending on the facilities and stuff. Yeah, they're obviously fed to try and maximize their weight gain. And you want to sort of produce a product at the end of it that's shiny, muscly, kind of looks like a muscly racehorse. And then the buyers will look at them in the sales and, they decide what traits they want. And it's all about just trying to maximize how appealing they are to the eye to try and attract in as many buyers as you can to bid on them.
And it's that constant balance, isn't it, of getting them to that place without breaking them in the process.
So you got to push them hard to get them to look like that. But then, as you know, if you push them too hard, you'll end up with X-ray issues. And then as soon as they've got X-ray issues, their value can effectively become nearly zero, depending on the problem and what it is. So yeah, it's a constant balancing act of trying to maximize their growth without too much growth, obviously.
And having them growing prior to the point coming in for sales prep, so that they're already well grown when they come in, and you're really just finishing them off.
You're sort of pushing them along the whole time, because obviously the sales companies come and assess them in August, and then the first sales in the following January. So you've got to have them forward enough in August that when they look at them, they want to put it in the sale. Because if they're not forward enough then they won't get into the sale, and it doesn't really matter what they do down the track.
And in August, a majority of them are not yet 12 months old. They're still running.
Well, yeah, basically next to none of them are when they get them, and obviously it's the middle of winter or it's towards the end of winter. They've just been through winter, like it's.
And it's all. I hate looking at horses in August in the southern hemisphere because they're going through that change of coat and change of season, and they
And a lot of them are that sort of like 9 to 12 months old. Well, that's what the vast majority of them are, and that's when a lot of horses look like they look funny, like they're sort of in a funny growth stage.
Yeah, they are. Yep.
And like the sales companies come and look at them and they say, "I don't really like that." And you're like, "Oh, well, it was a really nice horse 6 weeks ago, and it'll be a really nice horse again in 6 weeks' time, but just right now, it doesn't look that great."
Yeah. Yep. No, I know exactly what you mean. So traditionally on your farm, and I love your dad. He was definitely one of my favourite farm owners and managers to work with in all the years that I spent doing a lot of on-farm work in the Hunter. And it was always very hard to convince him to feed the horses less feed. So he loved them, didn't he? Like, I mean, he still, I'm sure, does love them.
And it's also like it's an industry. Like the thoroughbred mare in the Hunter Valley is too fat. Everyone has their mares too fat because they're worried because obviously, the vast majority of horses are owned by clients, not by the farm. So everyone's worried, or if my horses aren't quite as fat as the farm down the road, the owners are going to come and look at them and because they're obviously, a lot of them are uneducated and realise a fat horse is probably actually worse off than a horse that's slightly underweight. But they worry that if their horses aren't as fat as the place down the road, then the clients are going to come and look at them and go, "Well, I'll take them to this other farm where they're fat." Because the perception is the fatter they are, the better looked after they are, the more healthy they are.
Yeah, and it's been a tricky thing in the thoroughbred industry, just dealing with the owners being uneducated in terms of how horses are managed. And I had the most struggles with keeping horses sound on the farms that had the irrigated pasture. But the owners of the horses love to see their mares and foals lying around in green grass, but it's so hard to manage.
Like horses, thoroughbreds or horses aren't, but they're not dairy cows. Like they're not designed to live on lush green, flat, irrigated paddocks. Like that's so foreign to their natural environment.
Yep. Yeah, no, absolutely. And there's those grasses that get the unbalanced calcium phosphorus ratios, and so there is a lot in what is perceived to be the best for the horse versus what is best for the horse. But to give everyone a little bit of a concept of how much I loved your dad, I actually sent my mare Keela to him to foal down, and we're just talking off air there. It was the 20th of September 2011. So, and that was Popcorn's mum. I talk about Popcorn a little bit. Popcorn's still going strong. She'll be 15 this September. So I love your farm and the way the horses were treated and handled, and they were always well fed, if often overfed, because your dad just loved to feed them. So because of that, I think your yearlings were often fed a lot in yearling prep as well. So can you just talk us through, because I want to set this up so that we know what it was before. Like, can you just talk us through how the yearlings were fed during sales prep traditionally?
Yeah, so they would be fed, like the diet was based, which I think a lot of people had used the product of the feed company that you used to work for. Like it's a 2-part diet where they use like a mare feed in conjunction with a feed that's a sweet feed that's designed for yearlings.
Yep, you can mention those. No problem to mention the names. You can talk about it makes it easier. So it was the Biomare Cube from Pride's, and then the Easy Prep.
And their Easy Prep. Yeah, so that would be combined in varying ratios, and then they'd also have like rice bran, like Equidul or something as well on top. Really, when we were feeding that was sort of all we really used. Like we used to use Mare Cubes, Prep, and Equidul and sort of adjust it all. But
in rough quantities, like would sort of 2 kilos.
So they would be getting like probably 7 kilos of grain a day, probably. But the thing is, like when they were getting fed that much grain, and although they were getting a lot of roughage, it was not overly diverse. Like it was normally just hay and chaff and not
just
much
loose
else.
and hay.
Yeah. like they wouldn't eat all their feed either. So then like it's sort of not only you feeding them more than they need, but you're also feeding them more than that again because they're not even eating it all. So you're hipping it out. And then you don't really know what they're getting because they're not eating everything you
Mhm.
give them. So then it's just, yeah, makes it all a bit technical.
Mm-mm. And they would be 350 to 400 kilos at this.
Yeah, probably around 400, like probably between, yeah, 370 and 450, like depending on time of year and,
Mm.
big
So
little ones.
it's a
Yeah.
lot of grain, and it's not,
Mm.
this was normal 20
Yeah.
years ago, 15 years ago. Like, it was just normal to feed that much grain because we had in our
Yeah.
heads that, and you read textbooks, and that's how the textbooks told you to feed young horses. 60% or more concentrate, 30%, 40% forage. So, what was it that made you start questioning that traditional approach to feeding these prep horses?
Well, a couple of things. So, like, nearly all the yearlings would end up on a omeprazole to basically so they would eat, because otherwise you would just they'd be leaving more and more feed.
Yeah, right.
And then also because they're getting so much grain and like their guts so out of balance, like it's kind of like a snowball thing where you got to keep giving them more and more to get
The effect.
to get the
Yeah,
gains.
yeah, yeah. Okay, so omeprazole, in case anyone is not familiar with that drug, is the acid blocking drug that is used to control gastric ulceration. So with that much grain, so we know that anywhere over 1 gram of starch per kilogram of body weight, which is about 1.5 kilos per meal of the feeds that you're feeding. You go above that and you increase the risk of gastric ulcers. And if you go above 2 grams of starch per kilogram body weight per feed, which you would have been well above that amount, then
Yep.
the risk of ulcers goes right up. So it makes sense just from a starch perspective, but also because they weren't eating a lot of hay, there's not a lot of chewing and salivation going on. So
Yeah.
the stomach is left in a really acidic state to be fermenting a lot of grain, which produces more acid, and then they're not getting that saliva in there as well. And there's also not that fibre mat that stops the acid from splashing around. Like, you can
Yep.
imagine grain is
Yep.
kind of all splooshy, technical word for Friday afternoon, in there. So you've got, it's fermenting, it's creating acid. There's the acid from the stomach, and then you'll ulcerate them really quickly, which is why you're noticing they stop eating. So then you medicate them and they'll keep eating the grain, but then the next thing you notice now is that, well, they're not doing as well and we have to feed them
Yeah.
more. And I think what we'd find if we went and did some microbiome testing is that we would have obliterated the fibre fermenting bacteria in their hind gut by now.
Yeah.
So they're only now able to extract energy from grain by digesting
Yeah.
starch in the small intestine. And any forage they are eating, the majority of that energy will be getting wasted because the starch fermenters are happy fermenting starch, and it's too much work
Yeah.
and effort for them to worry about fibre. And your fibre fermenters are no longer there. And it becomes this downward spiral of, they're doing okay, but you've kind of overdone it a little bit, and then the more you feed them, the worse it gets.
Yep.
And then I guess what was their behaviour like? Because this is a big piece of this.
They're probably no different to what most people perceive a thoroughbred yearling in prep to be. Like
Yep.
generally like a fairly unhappy, hard to handle type of horse. Like
Mm.
that's sort of that's the general perception of what a thoroughbred yearling in prep will be. Like they always say they're full of feed, they've got a lot of energy, but they don't really need to be like that.
And it's become like the accepted norm, is
Yeah.
that
Like, yeah,
that's the way they.
that's how they're meant to be, because I guess that's how they've been for so long that everyone just assumes, well, that's just how it is.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So you're seeing all of this. What was it that kind of gave you the courage, I guess? Because it takes a lot to step away from what everyone else in the industry does. But what was the point where you went, okay, something's got to change here. I need to try and do things differently.
Yeah, I guess just like over the last like probably few years, like started slowly changing a few things. Like, like we tried different sorts of fiber, but then like we were using fibre protect, but then couldn't get that in from New Zealand anymore because it had a botulism issue, I think.
Yeah, there was something got bailed up in the.
And then, like I come to work early when the yearlings are in and feed them. So they have food before, because they used to exercise on an empty stomach. Like they get exercise first thing in the morning. So they'd be exercising on an empty stomach, which obviously worsens the whole ulcer
Yeah.
situation.
Yep.
And then I guess probably like since I've been, like what probably brought on the sort of final change where we changed a fair bit of stuff in the sale prep's just gone, was probably the podcast and listening to, like the actual science behind it. And, like when you listen to the science, like it makes a fair bit of sense, really. So,
because I think it was some of the earlier episodes, wasn't it, where we talk about evolution and how they're meant to have all this fibre diversity and that their diets are meant to be fibre-based and with anything. So, I mean, with nutrition, but also, with their bone health and their joint health, as soon as we move a horse away from what they did for millions of years without us controlling them, we start to cause problems. And feeding them the way that we have traditionally fed them in yearling prep moves them so far away from the way that their gut evolved.
Well, I think a thing is because like on the farm, we fold down some stock horses and look up, like do some rehabilitation for injured stock horses and stuff. And because the vast majority of them live on a fibre only diet, like it's amazing, like they'll come here and some of them could stay for up to a month and you'll feed them just hay. Yeah, so they could be a lactating brood mare just on hay and they will do just fine lactating, feeding the foal on hay. Whereas like if that was a thoroughbred mare, she would fall away in a heap within, like probably 3 or 4 weeks. You'd start to see like really noticeable losses in, body condition, milk production. And like, just because obviously thoroughbreds are fed grain from pretty much to as soon as they're old enough, really, because like, all the mares are fed. So like, as soon as they can, they'd start to eat a little bit of her food. So like their whole gut system is set up to be living on a grain-based diet, whereas the stock horse doesn't have that. So like, it's amazing how like, they're effectively the same animal, but because they've been managed so differently, the outcome is so different.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably a little bit of genetic difference between them, but you're right. Like it's been so fascinating watching. We took an off the track. We've had her nearly 18 months now, but we actually measured her specific microbiome over the first 12 months, and it was amazing watching her microbiome shift as she went from heavily grain-based racing feed through to pretty much pasture and fibres. It's an awesome observation because the stock horses, their hindgut is going to be so full of bacteria and fungi that can extract everything they can possibly extract out of fibre.
Yeah.
Whereas your grain-fed horses, and when grain's overdone, especially, their microbe population is just not as well set up to go and do the fibre digestion. Like it's quite complicated fibre digestion, and you need like a really good community of microbes to complete it. Yep. So your stock horses, have got everything they need to do that, whereas a lot of your thoroughbreds won't necessarily. Yeah. With those mares, though, they really should be, just as an aside, they really should be at least on a balancer pellet, because hay, even though it might be giving them enough protein and energy, calcium, phosphorus, and a lot of the trace minerals they won't be getting enough of. So at a minimum, because they don't need any energy, they're holding their condition, but at a minimum they should be getting a dose of, just as an aside, a dose of balancer pellet. But okay, so you're noticing with them that they're on hay and they're doing just fine, and yet over here you've got this thoroughbred yearling that you're feeding 7 kilos of grain to, and it's not going backwards, but you're having to feed more and more to get the right thing. So when you did change what you were doing, what were the things you changed? Like, what does your yearling prep diet look like in this prep just gone?
So we removed the mare cubes altogether, kept the prep the same, so they were getting the same of that. They were already getting like lucerne and oat and chaff, added in Rhodes grass haylage. They basically are on ad lib grassy lucerne hay because like they have as much as they want. thing. Like they don't, and then they spend sort of probably 8 hours a day in a grass yard, so they've got the ability to graze. Like them yards are ryegrass kikuyu based, but obviously over the summer they're mostly kikuyu because the ryegrass is sort of coming to the end of its growing season.
Yep.
And we had fed a gut balancer, a gut supplement for sort of 3 years beforehand. And like now I'd probably realised we probably don't need that. But then I sort of left that in as a bit of a safety net because like sort of changed enough stuff. I thought that can't sort of change everything at once.
Yeah, well,
Well,
it's got enzymes, if I know the right supplement, but it's got enzymes in it which are actually still useful. Like I would actually say still leave that in there because what we know about horses is that some of them actually don't have a naturally good level of starch digesting enzymes. So you'll get, and I see this in race horses a lot, is that you'll get some that just don't do well. They're fed a really good diet and yet they've still got, low fecal pHs and showing signs of grain going through to their hindgut, and it'll be because, there's a highly variable concentration of digestive enzymes in their small intestine. So that supplement is adding those enzymes in there for them. So, for some horses, they won't need it because they'll have them naturally, but for the other horses that don't have them naturally, it'll just catch them and make sure that they are using the grain really efficiently. Okay, so if we took the biomere out, did the rice bran stay or it went as well?
Yeah, sorry, and then we had like Equigel and like extruded lupins, sort of use them to top up the sort of calories without sort of like still keeping it fairly cool. And then because the yearlings are like they're all managed individually and they're all individual. So like some just had the prep and the forage and nothing else, whereas some were having the prep and then, like a couple of 100 grams of lupins and a couple of 100 grams of rice bran. And some might have one and not the other, and some had both, and just sort of depending on the horse,
Mix and match.
like
Yep.
some needed to lose weight, some's weight was fine, they could continue on, and then others, they needed a little bit of a push along.
What was the average grain amount or hard feed amount now? You went from 7 kilos down to
probably sort of 3.5-ish, like probably 3, some maybe might have got to almost 4, but definitely no more than 4. So like it's almost halved really.
Okay. And you've halved their feed, but they still gained weight and muscle and did everything that you wanted them to do?
Like they didn't look any better, but they looked the same. So
as good. Yeah.
Yeah, as good, which like because we weren't really chasing, we didn't really want them to look better. We're happy that they just look the same because like we weren't unhappy with the way they looked before. It was just sort of their behaviour and their manure and all that sort of stuff that was, and obviously you just feed them a whole heap of feed, which costs a lot of money for no real benefit. So
they're not utilising it efficiently, and it's also feeding them that much as reducing the efficiency with which they're digesting their fibre. So I do say to people sometimes, in the right context, you may as well take that dipper of feed and just tip it on the ground because that's as useful, and it won't do any damage if it's over there. That's
right.
Yeah. So appetite was a big thing, and you said you had to have them pretty much had to keep them on omeprazole to keep them eating. How did appetite change when you made these changes?
So they basically, other than one filly, and she was an orphan, so I think like she had some like pre-existing issues that probably affected her ability to sort of handle the whole like yearling prep sort of environment. But the rest of them, they just ate fine. They'd finish their feed. They'd eat most of their hay. They'd graze all day in the yard, and they sort of had a great appetite really.
Yeah, good. And I think you said only one had to be on omeprazole out of that cohort, versus 100% of them previously.
Yeah, like obviously there'd be the odd horse that's just in the past that for some reason. Like, it just didn't worry them, and they just eat fine and they'd be fine. But yeah, like the vast majority of them end up on omeprazole for some proportion of the yearling prep.
And it's a lot cheaper to feed them this way, the new way.
Yes.
You
Well,
got-
omeprazole is like it's expensive.
Yeah. So it's better for the horse, and it's so much less expensive for whoever's paying for the prepping. So there was also a change in the manure consistency that you noticed.
So, like on the old diet, they would basically like be pretty much cow pats. Like, that's as good as you'd sort of generally see, which is not really how a horse is meant to be.
Yeah.
So with the new diet, like most of them were sort of consistently like a soft form, like a normal manure soft form, pretty much what you're really looking for.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, and you're right. Like a horse's manure should never be cow pat, like should never be flat. It's probably another one of those things that it gets so used to seeing that in the industry that people think that that is normal for horses that are like race horses or yearling prep horses.
Like some people even probably,
never.
Like they see a horse that's not like that and they're like, well, that horse probably needs more grain.
Yeah.
Because it's not like all the other ones.
Oh, it kills me. And if you smell, do you remember the smell of that manure? Like, do you remember the
it was quite
acidic kind of vomity smell?
Like very similar to like a cattle feedlot type of, like that half acidosis sort of.
Yep, and that's all your grain fermenting, and then there's so much volatile fatty acid and lactic acid in the manure that you can literally smell it, whereas you shouldn't be able to. It should just smell more like manure now, normal horse manure. Hey, quick pause. If you're trying to figure out what to feed your horse, you don't have to do it solo. The My Happy Horse app helps you make sense of nutrition clearly, calmly, and without overwhelm. It's like having me in your pocket when you need reassurance the most. Visit myhappy.horse or grab it from the App Store. Okay, let's get back into it. So tell me, when making these changes, like, because it's easy to look back now and go, yeah, like we did a good thing and we made all those changes and it's good, but how nervous were you going into, because you only get one shot at this, right? Like they're only yearlings
fairly
once.
nervous because obviously, like you only get one shot, and like the first lot of yearlings we did, they were in for 10 weeks. But like by the time, like if it didn't work, by the time you realise it's not working, probably kind of getting close to being too late to do anything about it. So like, it was obviously a little bit nerve-wracking, but I sort of sold it to Dad with the fact that if we do this, like it will work, and also the horses will be a lot easier to handle, which that sort of got him across the line.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a staff safety thing, and it's so much nicer to be around horses that are nice to be around. So while we're on that was one. I was just scrolling through my phone here while I'm chatting to you, which is not good form, but to find the message that you actually sent me, which is, it made me want to just do a cartwheel. Because you say at the end of it, biggest change would be, and this was completely unsolicited, this was just a message you just sent me out of the blue. We hadn't actually been talking about this, but you said biggest change would be in their behaviour. They're a lot happier and much easier to handle. Yeah. And that says so much for where their gut is at, because there's that whole gut-brain axis communication thing where literally what's going on at the back end there in their hindgut is communicating with their brain to sort of tell them what's going on in the world, and they cannot think properly when their microbes get all tipped upside down.
And also they just got like heaps of excess energy. Like they're just like a kid on red drink, really.
Yeah, they are, but it's interesting though, Zac, if you think about it from an energy perspective, because you were feeding them 7 kilos of grain, and you were prepping them. I mean, they're getting to the sales. They look good. They sold however they sold. But you now have horses that are on less grain, more hay, access to pasture. Actually, there was one thing I wanted to ask. Was the access to pasture new, or did they always have that?
So always when we've prepped our yearlings on the farm, they've always had access to pasture. But like in previous years, just for logistical reasons, we've had to prep them off site, and often at them facilities there hasn't been the ability for them to have access to pasture or even like yards really. So
Mm.
like it's a little probably with the behavior thing, like I think like it's like probably the two things put together, like the fact they can spend like a fair proportion of the day
Yeah. Yep.
outside. Like it's good for their head to be able to just go out, be a horse,
Oh,
walk around, put
absolutely.
their head down, graze.
Yep. But when you think about it, like back to their energy thing, like yes, they're like kids on red drink, but which I think actually is a scientific fallacy. I don't think they've ever been able to prove that sugar makes kids go crazy. But that's an aside. They still put on as much weight feeding them this new way, and yet their behaviour is really different. But that tells me that the energy equation was about the same, because otherwise they wouldn't have put on the same
Yeah,
amount of weight. But the way that they were getting the energy and the way that that energy was affecting their gut has a big
yeah.
impact on their behaviour.
Well, I guess too, probably, because I think this is right, like from the fibre, the energy is released slowly throughout the day, whereas the grain would be like a surge of energy, then a lull, then it like they're probably still getting the same amount of energy, but they're getting it over the full day as opposed to,
Mm.
you know, like shorter periods of peak of energy and then
Yeah, and that may be partly playing into it, but I just see so consistently that when we change a horse's diet so that we stop messing up the hindgut and stop killing off all their good fibre fermenting bacteria, which are also the ones that send you're all good, life's good, you're safe, you've got enough food, like all the
yeah,
calm sort of messages that they get, their behavior just changes so much. I see it in racehorses all the time. They go from just
yeah,
these fire-breathing dragons on raw grain feeds to just kind of, resting a hind leg in the tie-ups waiting to go out for work. And as chill as
yeah,
anything, they'll walk home like a stock horse on a loose rein, stuff like that. But they've got lots of
yeah,
energy to race. And it's just that
yeah,
that shift in where the energy is digested and the impact that it has on the hindgut as well. And I agree with you completely that being out in the yard and being able to graze and all that stuff definitely has an impact as well.
yeah,
I still think that if you went back to feeding them the old way and had them in yards, you would
and put them
still,
out, they can still
yeah.
be
And they're in pain too, right? Like they've got gastric ulcers,
yeah,
because of the way that they were fed, and that doesn't, no one can think properly when you've got pain in your
yeah, that's
gut
right.
too. So yeah, no, just but that behaviour bit, and then when they're happy and they're calm, they're going to do better. And we know this from production animals. So, happy piglets will
Yeah,
will do a lot better. They gain weight faster and all of that
yeah.
sort of stuff. So it all feeds into the same thing. Okay, Zach. So question for you: if another farm manager said to you, "I'd love to feed more forage and less grain, but I'm worried the yearlings won't look good enough for sale," what would you say to them?
Well, they will if like if you look into it and understand the science and consult an expert, you'll see that it will just work and well, like work for us, but like the science says it'll work. So like if you feed them correctly and yeah, like there's going to be obviously the odd horse that it doesn't work for, and but probably nothing was going to work for that horse either. Like that horse that won't do on this diet probably like it's probably going to do worse on 7 kilos of grain. Like it may have some pre-existing issue with its gastrointestinal system or something. So like yeah, I think well, it's definitely worth a try anyway. And two, like if you're nervous, then like because like the sales are like you've got better sales and lesser sales. So like if you're going to try it for the first time and you're a bit not sure about it, maybe try it on the yearlings that are going to one of the lesser sales because there's less to lose
Mm.
sort of thing.
Or run a cohort of yearlings that are not
Yeah.
going to a sale
Y-
alongside and just see, if you
Yeah.
just want to sort of bring them in for handling or whatever and just see how they do. But it is a really one of my favourite phone calls of all time. And it was actually a standard bred farm, and they really sort of started in the last 10, 15 years. I really started prepping horses as well. It wasn't really a thing before that. But I remember this guy, because I'd been saying same thing to him, like, stop feeding so much grain to your yearlings. Like, they don't need it. And I said it in a lot more words than what I'm saying now, but essentially, you're going to mess up their hindgut and then nothing works properly in their body. Anyway, he rings me one day And this was years after I'd told him that, and he'd never done it. He'd always just he was so attached, and he was feeding a very similar diet to what you were feeding, but he was very attached to feeding that diet. And then he rings me one day and goes, Nerida, I did what you told me, and it's worked really well. And I was like, oh, finally. It takes something to step away from what everyone else in the industry does, because there's always that fear that you're going to be, like, so you're told to sell, it's not going to work or whatever.
Yeah, like your ones look different to everyone else's, and like you're so silly for doing it because we all do it this way and that, and like as you can see, that's why we all do it like this. But
no, he did, and it could be exactly the same story. He was feeding so much less. He found that they were doing better than what they had been previously, and I can't remember the details of the hay and the pasture with him, but yeah, the same thing. They were calmer and the less omeprazole and all of these things that we've talked about. So you know that it works. I know that it works. He knows that it works. And I do lots of work with farms up in Japan. They know that it works because they're very, very forage driven. It's a tricky thing to get more people to follow. Like, thank you for being one of the first in this space and for being willing to do this, because I think it all helps to give more people the confidence to step away from what a reasonably, well, not even reasonably, a very traditional industry has always done, and just to try something different.
Well, I'd imagine, like, I think like of all sort of different horse disciplines, like the thoroughbred industry would be the most fixed in their ways. Like, this is the way we've done it for however long, and unless like there's like beyond compelling evidence to change, no one's going to change.
Yeah. And the compelling evidence is there. This is part of what I love about working with the Japanese, is they will say to me whenever I'm going up there, bring us whatever the most recent science is in the industry. Like, they just always wanting to know, like, what's new, to the point where I'm like, I don't really have much new to tell you. Like, we're kind of caught up. But here in Australia, we're a long way behind a majority. Some of you are catching up with where the science is, which is great, but they're a long way behind. So if you had to summarize the whole experience in one sentence, what did the yearlings teach you?
Less grain results in happier, healthy yearlings look very similar to those prepared on higher grain diets. So basically, you can produce the same product that's just happier, easier to handle, and costs less money.
Have you ever worked out how much less? Like, you've got about 3.5 kilos.
No, I haven't. I really should sit down and sort of work it out,
because what's a day worth of omeprazole?
Well, you're going to be looking at sort of like, depending on how much they need, like you're probably going to be spending like $5 a day just on omeprazole. And like you're spending probably, you're spending another probably at least $5 a day on grain. And then, plus other stuff like, and then times that by, by 7, then by 8, 10, 12 weeks, like ends up a fair bit of money.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And for me, the biggest thing out of this is just the welfare of the horse. Like, you're now feeding them in a way that I mean, there's still a lot of grain in there, but it's being compared to what a horse that's roaming around
in the paddock
before humans were in its life. But there's so many elements now of this diet, and having forage. I'm assuming you fed them hay before they worked in the morning. So that makes a big difference to their comfort and their welfare. Like, it's such a good shift for the horses, and there's an awful lot of places I wouldn't send any of my horses. I have sent one of my horses to you before, and absolutely, if I had to get a yearling prepped ever, which is really unlikely, but if I did have to, I'd send it to you guys without a worry, because there's not a lot of places that I would want a horse going into knowing that they're going to be fed in that traditional way, because it does so much damage to them physically and mentally. It does so much damage to them. So thank you for being brave enough to do what's not normally done. So to finish up, Zac, are you willing to take part in our clear round quick questions with no refusals? I should have changed that, shouldn't I? I sort of some sprint up the straight for the thoroughbreds. Righto. So, Zac, what is your all-time favourite horse movie or book?
The Winx documentary. It was
Ah,
sort of very. Have you
I
seen it?
have not seen it. I must watch it. Yeah,
Very, very interesting.
yeah. It's yeah, it's definitely it's one on my list. I just haven't gotten around to watching it yet.
She's obviously one of them horses that, like you look back in 50 years and, it'll be like Secretariat and, them sort of
Mm,
horses that are like legends.
yep.
And she'll be the same in 50 years, like when watched her run a last race, which was like, I've been to a fair few different sporting events and like it was by far like just the atmosphere was just incredible, really.
Yeah, well, I love our champion Aussie race horses. You sort of look back to, well, Farlap's the one that pops into my head, but like they're
Yeah.
so they sort of become like the people's horse.
Yes,
And
that's right.
yeah.
Like, yeah, and then almost like the trainers obviously training them for their owners, but then like they get to a stage where they kind of train them for the whole public because people don't want to get them
Yep,
beat,
yep,
and like, the pressure on the trainer would just be
yep,
incredible.
yep. And they're freaks of horses when they can win and win and win like that. So, what is one myth about thoroughbreds you wish would disappear forever?
That they're all mad. Most are, some are, but the vast majority are not. Like everyone says, "Oh, thoroughbred." It's like a thoroughbred's going to be mad, but honestly, they're no madder than any other breed. Like stock horses are just as crazy at times
Yeah,
compared to
and
a
it all
thoroughbred.
comes down to how you feed them and how you handle them. And
Yeah,
we've got a beautiful big girl here, Alay, and she's just the biggest, gentlest giant, and she's nearly 17 hands. But when little kids come up to her, she puts her head right down, and she's just beautiful. She melts me. And there's nothing mad about her.
yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one. I like that one. Thank you. If your yearlings could write you a one-sentence Google review of their time in your yearling barn, what would you want it to say?
That they had a relaxing experience and felt very healthy.
Excellent. Love it. Love it. If you could ride any horse, past or present, which horse would it be?
Winx.
Yeah. Oh,
Because of like her ability to sort of win races from anywhere. And also like
uh,
towards the end of her career, like that whole like the experience of like riding her in front of the crowd
oh yeah. Oh,
would
I've
have
got
been
chills.
amazing for Huey.
Yep. Oh, yep. Unbelievable. Just the power in them. They're just unbelievable. And if you had 2 minutes with every thoroughbred farm manager in the world, what would you tell them?
Feed more forage, especially when horses are boxed,
Yep.
and listen to the podcast.
Yeah. Oh, you're awesome. Thank you, Zac. Happy Horse Nutrition
Yes,
Podcast, right?
that's
Yeah.
exactly right.
Oh, very good. Well, thank you so much, Zac.
Thank you.
You've been amazing for the podcast. You've sent me suggestions for episodes, and I really am very grateful for you coming on
Thank you.
and doing this episode, because it takes guts to do what you've done, and I'm so glad that it's worked out as well as it has, and it takes something to come on here and tell everyone else about it too. So I'm very
No worries
appreciative.
at all.
Thank you. And yeah, I keep saying I have to send your dad photos of popcorn. I don't think I ever have. I'm terribly slack on that, but it was yeah. I
She'll be
always
ready to
think
have her
of
own file now.
him. Well, truth be told, she's so much like her mother, complete with the insulin dysregulation, that I'm like, I'm done with insulin dysregulated horses. And in fact, I just want to own thoroughbreds now, because they're so much easier to manage. They don't have that affliction.
Yes.
But yeah, she could have her own foal, but I don't think we will breed from her anyway. But thank you very, very much, Zac.
Thank you.
Zac, you truly make my heart happy. Biggest thank you to you for being brave enough to change and for sharing your experience with us here. You have just reinforced for me again how much good comes when we start feeding horses with the gut in mind. Zac's less grain, more forage diversity, better gut comfort and happier horses is a direction I really hope we see more of the industry moving in the near future. Now, if you loved this episode, please hit follow so you don't miss any episodes of the Happy Horse Nutrition Podcast. And I'd really love if you'd share this one with someone who feeds young horses, works with thoroughbreds, or just loves seeing horses managed in a way that helps them feel and function better. Thank you so much for listening, and I will catch you in the next episode.